Nile Rodgers. Welcome to Australian Musician.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So how have you tackled the hurdles of that 2020 has put in front of you?
It's been challenging, but in a strange way, really rewarding, because I've done so many recordings, I've written so many songs, and a lot of the work feels really important. So everything from now working on Coming to America again on the theme song, which I did in the first go round, to I mean, I almost can't even mention all the different artists and records that I've done and have on the schedule. It's just it's almost daunting if it wasn't so much fun.
Yeah, I have to apologize because we were supposed to be doing this yesterday, and I had in my mind that it was the next day for some reason. If that was a session, what would the consequence be? What are the consequences of tardiness in recording sessions?
In today's world, it may not be as critical as it once was, because today we can, we do a lot of home recording. Like right now, you're talking to me in my home recording studio. At some point in time, I know I'll end up back at Abbey Road, but for now, I have so many things that I can do. And basically I have a tie line to the whole world. So I can record with anybody in any country, and anytime I want. So it's wonderful.
Yeah, I read that David Bowie once admonished some session musicians, and it wasn't you, for wasting time in the studio, and telling them that any one of 1,000 musicians would want their job. How did you find David's studio regime and work ethic?
Yeah, he wasn't like that with me, because I can pretty much say with total accuracy and certainty, without even knowing what the other records were like. Let's Dance was that album we did in 17 days from start to finish. So he had to have been happy. I don't even believe, and this is the truth, I've said this many times, I don't believe that he thought we were going to finish the album. We had only booked 3 weeks. And I believe that he thought that that was just time to, record some basics with my guys in America. And just then he would sit back and take the pulse of the project. He had no idea that we were going to finish. like, wow. Like in a couple of days, we had everything recorded. It was like, holy cow. Now it's time to sing. Oh my God, let's get Stevie Ray Vaughan. Next thing you know, we were finished in no time at all. As a matter of fact, the last of the 3 of the 21 days, I didn't even really show up for work. I just came in to see what he was doing. And he was playing it back for record companies.
Yeah,
I guarantee you, no recording artist would ever have believed that that would have been the outcome when they started.
Yeah. How important is it that all musicians in a session are on the same energy levels? And if they're not, how do you approach that?
Well, I think that it doesn't make any difference it doesn't have to be that way throughout. It's my job as the producer to get us to that place. Very rare have I recorded a session where the vibe didn't feel great in the room, because that's really, that's my responsibility, to make everyone feel that I'm really there to serve them. The fact that they call me the producer and I'm supposedly the boss, I don't see myself that way. I see myself as a worker bee, and it's my job to make sure that everyone else performs to the best of their ability. And even more important than that, have a really good time.
Fender have kindly organized this interview for us. You're known as a Stratocaster guy. What was the attraction to the Stratocaster initially?
Hearing a young kid play through my amplifier that was this really expensive amplifier, and I had a really expensive guitar, and I thought I sounded really cool. And this young kid, uh, at that time, we had a pretty big hit record. And every now and then, we would open for the Jackson 5. We would substitute for this group called the OJs and open for the Jackson 5. But we also had a big enough hit record that we'd actually headline. So this was a show where we were headlining, and we had an opening act. And the opening act used our equipment because we weren't in a venue that was big enough, nor did they have a crew that would be efficient enough to turn the gear over. So they just used our gear, and then we came on after them. So the kid who was playing in the band before me was plugged right into my amp and sounded 10 times better than me. And all I could think of was not that his technique was so much better, but the instrument that he was playing was just more conducive to the style of music that he was playing, which is the style of music that we were playing, which is R&B and funk and soul music. And he was playing a Fender Stratocaster. And all along, my partner, Bernard Edwards, who at that time was actually my band leader, was telling me to buy a Strat, buy a Strat, buy a Strat. And I kept resisting until that kid showed up and opened for us. And I was like, oh my God, this kid is killing it. And I sound a little lame compared to him.
Yeah. You're known for your original Hitmaker 1960 Strat. Has that guitar traveled well? Has much been done to it over the years?
Yeah, no, it's actually a real workhorse. And a lot of people criticize me for the way that I treat it. They think that I mistreat my guitar because I carry it in a little cheap bag, a little cheap gig bag. I take it everywhere I go. And I think that those type of instruments were workhorses. That, you know, you're a working musician. And if you lead the life that I used to lead when I was younger, we were going from, you know, studio to studio, show to show. And that's just what it is. I never really changed, even though my doctor says to me, you know, no, you're 68 years old. You can get somebody to carry your guitar. I go, yeah, but I think I'd rather carry it myself.
Yeah. When you pick up a guitar for the first time, there's an immediate feel to it. I'm wondering, when you strapped on the Acoustasonic Strat for the first time, how did you feel about it?
That's what sold me. So I got one in my hands right now. So when you fall in love with an instrument, sometimes you can't really tell why. It just somehow speaks to you in a certain way. So if I analyze it, so this guitar just showed up at Abbey Road, and I don't even remember what the circumstance was or why they wanted me to play it or check it out, but it showed up and I picked it up and it was light. I love light guitars. Like I said, I started out playing jazz guitars, which were all basically just big box acoustic guitars with a pickup on them. So they're not solid mass. They're, you know, they resonate. They're thick and very light. And my Hitmaker is the lightest Stratocaster I've ever felt in my life. It weighs almost nothing. So when I picked this up, this felt like what I'm accustomed to feeling. And because mainly when I practice, you know, more of a jazz style. So I'm not plugged into an amplifier. So this guitar all of a sudden was my baby now to take to the hotel, and, you know, to go. You know, it's like, wow, I got a box. I got a jazz box that's light as a feather, and it's really versatile. So I was at Abbey Road, basically at a songwriting camp, and I found myself using it more and more. One, just because it was light, and it had a wide variety of sounds. Not that I used them that much. I went to the sound that felt most like what I wanted it to sound like, and I just stuck with it. And so I wound up writing a bunch of songs with a lot of different artists, and it just was cool. It was not a big deal. I wasn't making a thing out of it. I was just grooving with it. And the next thing you know, we're on tour, so it's light as a feather. So now I could actually carry two guitars. And so we're on tour. So I got the same guitar. So now this became my practice guitar. We're on tour with Cher, and next thing you know, boom, the quarantine hits, the pandemic hits, and all of my gear is now under quarantine, and it's shipped with Cher's gear, because when we finish a show, our gear goes in first, and then her gear goes in after ours, and her stuff weighs like 100,000 pounds, and we can't get to it. So I didn't even get my stuff back until just a few days ago. About 2 weeks ago, all my stuff finally came back from being quarantined with Cher's gear in Las Vegas. So I've been practicing more and more, and then when you're practicing and just playing a guitar a lot, it starts to become more and more friendly. You get into it more, and I don't even really think about it. I just play it because it's light and I can hear it. Right? And I don't have to put an amplifier on. I can just go. It's just, a thing.
Yeah. Can you imagine songwriting moments or sessions in the past where that guitar would have come in handy?
I don't know, because I don't really think like that. It's not the guitar necessarily for me that makes me creative. The musical part comes, and then I sort of interpret it with the guitar. So like, I don't need the guitar to make me think of the idea. Now, here's a really interesting situation. With this particular guitar, though, we had written a song, or we were working on a song called Inside the Box. I was writing with my friend Philippe Sace, and we do a lot of jazz funk stuff together just for our souls. And around that time, I was talking to the people at Fender, because I heard this wicked rumor that they were going to stop making the amplifiers that I use. And I kept thinking, uh-oh, what am I going to do once we start gigging again? And I try and get my amp, and the rental company said, oh, we don't have that anymore. So I didn't mind begging. And I called up, the people I know at Fender, and started begging, like, well, just make a bunch before you stop, and I'll buy them all, or whatever. And but I need to have my amplifier, because I have it's a sort of distinctive style, and I believe that the resonant quality of 10-inch speakers are more conducive to my style of playing than 12-inch speakers. It's just not who I am. So by having these discussions going back and forth, we also were talking about a production model of the Hitmaker. And so we were going back and forth with the specs on that and how to get that right. And in the course of having these different discussions, somehow the manual to this guitar shows up. I'm in the middle of writing a song that I think is pretty much already composed. And then we start reading the manual, and it talks about all these different voice characters, all these different voice variations and stuff like that. I'm like going, I'm not doing any of that. I'm not taking advantage of any of that stuff at all. So then I start to not recompose, because the song at that point I feel is finished, but I started to reinterpret it. So I had my engineer, who basically had the manual memorized, and he started calling out the different voice, I would say the voice descriptions or characterizations. and then he would explain it to me, and then I would say, okay, well, let me go to this part of the song and use that voice interpretation and play it. And we did that, and it sort of worked. It was fun and it was interesting, and it was unlike anything I'd ever done before, because normally when I'm playing, I just get a few sounds and I just play. I certainly never have someone else usually calling out the song, you know, the settings to me. Usually I just, you know, take it and turn it and say, okay, that sounds cool, and there you go, I'm done, and record. So what Russell did, Russell is my engineer and sort of like partner in crime. He had it all memorized, and he started calling it out to me, and he was like going, well, this setting is more appropriate for playing harmonics. Well, the song that we had composed was already in G minor, and so there were certain harmonics that were nice and responsive, but then others you had to generate with technique. But that technique puts the note up an octave. So I had to just, you know, it was sort of an intellectual exercise as much as a musical exercise, as much as it was getting to know this guitar.
Yeah. So have you resolved the amplifier issue?
Yeah. Amplifiers, yep, it's done. It's all good.
What about strings, Nile? How often do you change your strings, and when do you change them?
So you are gonna laugh, man. I am so old school. So let me give you the proper setting. Remember, I was born very poor, and R&B musicians back in the day, we would rarely change our strings. We'd only change a string if it broke. So the sound of strings that have already been mellowed is a thing that is now a part of my sound. And it's like what I'm used to. And I always say to my guitar tech, when did you change the strings? I want to make sure that I've played it enough to do a show. I don't want new strings to play a show. That's just not the sound for me. The strings have to have somewhat mellowed. And also, I don't break strings very often. In my, 40 plus years of gigging, honestly, maybe in all those 40 years, I could have maybe broken one string a year, if that. And that's the truth. I just don't break strings. So when my tech changes the strings, he has a good idea of when the next show is, how much he's got to stretch it out and all that sort of thing before he knows it's going to be the sound that I like. So that's a long-winded way of saying I don't change my strings very often. And I get a little pissed off when he changes them too often.
What about picks? How important is the kind of pick that you use?
It's everything to my style. So even though I could play with heavier picks, or I could change the drop of a hat. Like right now, the way that they ship this guitar to me, the strings are a heavier gauge than I use, but that didn't mean that much to me because it was serving a certain purpose. And I figured, well, I'll just get used to playing like that. I'm not doing shows, so it's okay. I could use it to compose. I could actually use it to get my technique better because it's harder to play this guitar than it is to play the Hitmaker. So I actually love playing it because I want to be better. Even at my age, I want to play better tomorrow than I played today. And when I'm practicing, I'm trying to do things that are, and like that. So that wasn't totally clean. So I'd rather, I want to practice things that I'm not usually going to play because it's those things that I have to call upon when I'm doing a solo or whatever. I say, oh man, I got this down, and it just comes. I like to just play from feeling instead of intellect, if you will.
Yeah. You worked with the great Australian band Inxs on their track Original Sin. What are your memories of working with those guys?
man, we had so much fun, and it was so organic. From the moment we met, this is how strong the love affair was. So I had put out a solo album, my first solo album, which was a total failure, total flop. And that record, when I listened to the test pressing, I listened to it with David Bowie for the first time. And David said to me, Nile, if you make a record for me half as good as that, I'll be the happiest man in the world. I thought that he was out of his mind because I knew right away that the record was a flop. And I had been doing too many drugs and not thinking. I was just on some kind of artistic trip. I just wanted to make the record that I heard without thinking about the audience. So it was surprising as hell to me that I meet this band that I never heard of up in Toronto. I'm going up to see Hall & Oates and U2, and I'm working with this band, the Canadian band, and we go out to this place, and I run into these guys Inxs, and they're singing my single from my solo album, which is a complete flop, and they're singing it back to me in 4-part harmony. I'm like going, are you kidding me? Like, how do you even know this song? This is the most obscure record I've ever put out, and you guys are like, you got it down. Like they couldn't have known that they were going to meet me. That meant that they genuinely liked it. So for me as a composer, it really touched my heart because I knew that this was an obscure record, that I was doing it for myself. But to these guys, it touched them artistically. And they told me that they used it at their sound checks they would actually sing it at sound check in 4-part harmony. I was like, what? And they did it. And I was like, okay, I guess that means we have to work together. And that's how we met. The night we met, they sang my totally obscure song in 4-part harmony. And after I finished the band that I was working with up in Canada, we worked it out where I could work with Inxs.
Yeah.
Now, what was really wonderful about that is that story wound up having a long tail because I went up there to hang out with Hall & Oates. I got Daryl Hall to sing on Original Sin, right? Totally not planned. I record with Inxs in Electric Lady. We cut Original Sin. That's one take. Because what happened is the thing that made me really attracted to these guys was their drummer. Their drummer had a sound that was cutting, that was like incredible. I was like, how is this dude getting that sound on the bass drum? And then when we wound up talking, he showed me that he had a wooden beater. And I was like, damn, I got to try that. So when I recorded the band, he had his wooden beater and we're playing, and then poof, right when we finished the song, he breaks the bass drum head, right? We finish the song, and like on the last note or the next to the last note, boom, breaks the bass drum head. And we spend the next few hours trying to replace the head. But of course, now at this point, it's too late. And we listened to the track and realized that it was working. And that's it. That one take is what we used. We never tried to top it. Or if we did try and top it, we didn't, and that was it.
Yeah, you kind of sent them down that dance pop road, and they continued in that vein. You must have been pretty happy where they ended up with musically, with tracks like What You Need, New Sensation.
Absolutely.
Whether you're into those tracks.
Yeah, of course, and we became, So when I say lifelong friends, you got to understand that I'm probably one of the most aloof people in the world because I work so much. So when I finish the album, I'm already on to the next project. So it's not like I don't care and I don't want to carry on my relationships. It's just that now I'm engrossed in the next record. And I always want every artist to feel like I have their best interest at heart. It's all about them. So I'm so super focused on the next project, it could feel like, oh, how come Nile doesn't call us anymore? But that never really happened. And something interesting happened between Michael and I. We wound up on vacation in the exact same place like for me, completely around the world. Like I had no idea he was going to show up there. There was no reason for him to be there. To me, it felt like an obscure resort. Um, and and I couldn't believe it. I walk in and there's Michael Hutchence that I'm on, and we're in Thailand, like on Phuket Island. It was like, what are you doing here? And we started talking, and I became friends with the CEO, the person who started it, and I talked him into letting Michael and I build a recording studio. And unfortunately, you know, Michael didn't live to see that day, and I put that idea off for many, many years. But then the next thing you know, I don't even know how many years later, but I wound up working with the Aman group and building a recording studio in the Bahamas.
Yeah, great. Niall, you're so good at rewriting songs and bringing them to life. Have you ever considered doing an album of covers, your interpretations of other people's songs?
Not really. I don't mind playing other people's songs, but what's really happened to my life, which I would have never imagined would have happened when I started playing, was that I've done so many records that now everything I perform is something that I did, which is incredible to me. I mean, you know, that's a musician's dream. So when you come and see a CHIC show, which, you know, our longest shows are a little over, you know, a couple of hours, I never have to play a song that I didn't have something to do with, either wrote it or produced it. And we could do a 4-hour show and it would be the same thing, maybe even a 5-hour show. And, you know, and it will all be pretty much hit singles, which is extraordinary to me. I mean, obviously to varying degrees, not everything is Like a Virgin or Get Lucky or Let's Dance or Original Sin, but all of those songs we have in our show, depending upon how much time we have on stage.
Yeah. Yesterday on social media, you announced that you were selling your cars and a lot of guitars. What motivated that?
Honestly, a few months ago, I went to my storage locker and I looked around and I almost started weeping because I have so many beautiful, amazing instruments and they don't get played. And I just felt horrible. I was like, I just thought like, it feels like I'm hoarding, and that's not really where I'm coming from. The true story, and I don't want to take up a huge amount of time, but I got sober a little over 26 years ago. And during that period, I had decided that I was going to leave the music business. But because I love music so much, I wanted to stay connected. So I thought the nice way to stay connected was to start collecting instruments, you know, like if I found out that B.B. King played a guitar or Chuck Berry played a guitar or, you know, or Hendrix or Jimmy Page or something like that, you know, I started seeking instruments that had been played by, you know, either they were just important instruments because they were unique and amazing in and of themselves, or they had a history. So I started doing that, and probably very much like a drug addict, I just kept going. Like, you know, like they always say, one is, you know, too many and 1,000 is never enough. It was like I was just buying and not really thinking things through because I felt passionate about wanting to play these instruments. So of course I'd get them and play them that first day or the second day, but then I put them away in a storage locker. And then I just realized there was just too much. Like, why do I have all this stuff? It just doesn't feel right. And because I know that so many of these guitars are quite valuable and have a great history, as well as the cars that I've sort of amassed along the way, that'd be better for somebody who really can appreciate it and really could use it and enjoy it like I believe that I was going to do. And in the case of the cars, I actually did enjoy them for a great many years. So I just thought that, they can have a second life. Everything I have, when it came to cars, I'm the original owner. So it goes from me to whoever is going to buy it. So the thing that was a little bit misleading to people is I was really just going to that garage where I do have some of my cars to say goodbye to my yellow Range Rover that was just sold. So that's really what that was all about. But I made this really long tape that I go from my Range Rover to my other cars, but I never get to my other cars in that tape. It was just a really long clip because I was there for a long time, a really long time. So I just cut it off. So people thought like all those cars that they're seeing is my collection. It's like, no, my cars are there, but not all those cars are mine. Everything that I have, I'm the original owner. So they can't be that old, but I've been doing this now. I bought my first car and I've never not owned a Porsche or a Maserati or something like that. I bought my first car, I think in 77, and my first car was a Porsche. And so ever since then, I've had pretty cool exotic cars or just something unique. Like I never want the thing that everybody else has. I'm that weird guy. That's why the car in that video, the way that I bought that car was I walked into the showroom and I took a picture next to the car because it was so unusual to see a yellow Range Rover. And the salesman walked up to me and said, it's funny. Everybody comes in here and takes a picture, but nobody will buy it. And I went, you're the greatest salesman in the world. You just sold me a car because now that you told me nobody will buy it, I want it. So I knew that right away I'd have something really rare and special.
Yeah. One more question and I'll let you go. What are you most proud of?
Being alive this long. I led a very reckless life ever since I was quite young. And I wasn't really doing it. I didn't have like a death wish or anything like that. It was just people that I was around, and, my parents, were heroin addicts, and I was just around really cool musicians and cool people who, drugs and drinking and stuff like that was a part of their world. And so my parents, the great thing about my parents actually have a lot of great qualities, but one of I think the greatest qualities that they had was they were not hypocrites. They didn't say, well, it's okay for me, but not okay for you. Because I was the kind of kid who was really inquisitive, and I would say, well, what, I'd want to argue with, I like logic. If a person is logical with me, I go, oh, okay, I get it. But if it's illogical, I'll argue with them all day long. So when I wanted my first cigarette, my parents allowed me to smoke, and I was quite young. And when I took my first drink, my parents allowed me to drink, and I was quite young. And then my first joint, and and so what wound up happening is that I grew up during the hippie era. So my parents were beatniks, I was a hippie. And when you're that young and impressionable, you go through different phases of your life. So there were some phases where I was totally into like psychedelic drugs and all that. And then there were other phases where I lived like a hermit. No drugs, no nothing, only studied music. I was crazy into classical guitar. And I lived in this very small apartment. It was just one room and had a bed that pulled down from the wall, what we call a Murphy bed. And I just studied and practiced all day. And I lived like a monk. I was celibate. I didn't drink or drug or anything like that. So I was, I guess in a strange way, I had like these personality extremes. And So when I started collecting guitars, I wasn't drinking or drugging, and I had a personality extreme and started buying all these guitars. And now I realize, oops, that was the wrong thing, that I don't play them. Someone needs to play them. Someone needs to give them love. And when I went to say goodbye to my car yesterday, I think even in the video, I say, I hope the person who just purchased this has as much fun as I had, because it was great. I mean, I used to pick up Diana Ross every day, shuffle her up to my house here, and we'd record. It was amazing. It was just so many great memories. And, you know, I just hope that it, you know, that it has this second life with someone else, and they feel like it's a cool rock and roll car. You know, just like when you go to a recording studio and you go, wow, Hendrix recorded here? Man, there's magic in the walls. That's what happened with Inxs. That's the same place I did my first Chic hit single. That's where I did Get Lucky. That's where I did Inxs, Original Sin. That's where I did Hall & Oates, Adult Education. Electric Lady was magical for me simply because of Hendrix, and also because of my childhood. I played there before it was a recording studio. I played there when it used to be a nightclub.
Well, Nile Rodgers, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you, and I wish you all the best. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, man. Cheers.